Hey, welcome everybody. It is David Spark. It is my birthday today. So thank you everybody for the very nice birthday wishes. And I would like nothing better than to celebrate my birthday with my two guests, Archie Agarwal and Adam Shostak. Archie is the CEO of Threat Modeler. And Adam here literally wrote the book on threat modeling, Designing for Security. That's his book. By the way, Adam, at any point during this, if you copy and paste a link to your book in the chat room, that would be fantastic. So people can see that. And you could paste it in a few times, in fact, because, the chat goes quickly. All right. Let me get through all the basic information out of here. The topic for today is hacking bad threat modeling, an hour of critical thinking about the worst ways to identify what could go wrong. Now, although the topic is identifying bad threat modeling, if you were to do bad ideas on bad threat modeling, they'd actually be good ideas, but we don't want that. We do truly want bad ideas on threat modeling. So just make sure that you're aware that that's the bad ideas that we want. So get your bad ideas in now. Oh, let me actually let you all know.
Send them in. We need your bad ideas.
In addition, so at 20 minutes past the hour, we will put the poll up. Andrew, the producer in the background, put the poll up, and so you will vote on your favorite bad ideas. And then at 30 minutes past the hour, Archie and Adam will embrace the Department of Yes, and they will field your horrible ideas and explain why they want to implement them, and they're looking forward to it. Also, if you want to participate in any of our conversation on threat modeling, you got a question, you got a comment, just say, bring me on, all in capitalizations. And Andrew, the producer, will try to bring on as many as you as possible. Also, the link at the very bottom, it says, join us next Friday, November 6th, Hacking Risk Management. Go ahead and click on that at any time. It will not take you out of this video chat. You'll still be in it. You can register for next week's video chat as well. And I also want to remind you, stick around for our meetup, our one-on-ones at the very end. We get a ton of people that participate in this, but not as many stick around for the one-on-ones, and that is the most fun part of this. So at the very end, that link at the bottom will change to the link for the one-on-ones. You'll click on that. You'll participate. Nothing to plan at all. Absolutely nothing. Just join. We do the matching, and you get 5-minute meetings. It's a lot of fun. All right. Let's now get into our conversation about bad threat modeling. And since that is our topic, I'm going to throw this to you first, Adam. What constitutes a bad threat model?
Work that doesn't have value to the people who are doing it. That's
simply put. All right. Let's expand on that.
Okay. Sorry. I'm trying to be snappy here.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, if we're going to ask developers, if we're going to ask engineers, if we're going to ask ops folks to threat model with us, they've got to get something out of it. We've got to get to a result where either they've got assurance that they did a decent job at doing the work, or they find problems that they can fix. And so that the can fix is really important. It's a really important scope thing where if we just threat model the whole world, if we threat model our whole enterprise all at once, we find a lot of stuff that's legacy, that's brownfield, that we can't make any changes to. And people are like, oh, well, yeah, we knew that was broken before, and now you're telling us it's broken again. Thanks, I guess. We'll see you next year for another one of these.
By the way, next year for another one of these, often telling you the exact same thing, yes?
What's the point, right? And so that, to me, is a bad experience that we want to avoid.
Okay, pause right there, because I know a lot more to say on this subject. Let me go to Archie. Let's expand on this, agree or disagree with Adam on what makes a bad threat model.
No, I agree. And I actually want to take it a step further. I mean, the way I look at it, there are two aspects of it, right? First is, what are you capturing in a threat model, like Adam said, right? Does it reflect your attack surface? Yeah, it's a legacy application. You built it, but do you know what your attack surface looks like? Do you know? You probably know where your assets are, but do you know where your entry points are? Do you know the different paths an attacker can take to get to those assets? what controls you have in place, and what are the strengths of those controls. It's like from a technical point of view, I think that is something that needs to be captured in a threat model, and I've very rarely seen that. But then there's other aspect which I consider bad threat model is from a communication tool point of view. You have to understand threat model is a very effective communication tool for a security professional. So the way you look at it, the way I look at it is,
I like that
can
too.
you take your threat model to your stakeholders, your developers, your senior leadership, and then communicate to them, what it does? Because if you can, it is a bad threat model because you shouldn't have built it in the first place.
All right, I'm going to ask a really stupid question, and it should have been actually the question I asked even before this, but could you, Adam, in a very basic way, explain what a threat model actually is? I kind of generally understand that, but how do you define it?
So threat modeling is using models, using abstraction to think about what can go wrong, right? And a threat here is like, I'm going to beat you up if you don't give me your lunch money. It's the promise of a future bad thing if we don't do something to prevent it. Or it's the promise of SQL injection if we don't use prepared statements. And when I threat model, I think about four things. I think about what can go wrong, or excuse me, blah, blah, blah. I think about what are we working on? What can go wrong? What are we going to do about it? And did we do a good job? And so those to me are at the heart of good threat modeling. And let me talk about bad threat modeling here again for a second. There's two things that we confuse. There's threat modeling the activity and threat model the deliverable. And both are important, right? And so when we talk, and Archie said this, when we talk about can you bring your threat model, we very fluidly go from can we bring our threat model to let's go threat model. But they're two different things, right? One's the activity, and the other is an output or a record or something else that we have because we did the work. And given the choice between doing the work and having the record, I know where I stand.
Excellent. By the way, we have a lot of people have joined on. We've already got 92 people live, and we got 19 bad ideas. Phenomenal. And a spectacular question, our first one so far from Rick Woodward. I'm going to throw this one to you, Archie. I love this, and I'm definitely coming back to you on this, Adam, as well. Rick Woodward asks, how do you know if your threat modeling is complete? It seems like attackers get in through our blind spots. I mean, that's kind of what usually happens. So how do we get a sense of the level of robustness of our current models? I like that. What's your take on that, Archie?
So this is a very common question, and pretty much everyone I've spoken to asks this question, like, how do I know my threat model is complete? And to that, my answer is your threat model is never complete. You capture whatever you know about the system into your threat model. You provide as much context, as much detail, and get the deliverable, as Adam said. You have to get the deliverable that is effective and that is meaningful. Now, your threat model is not complete from multiple perspectives. First is new threat vectors are identified on a daily basis. How can you really say that your threat model is complete? Because the moment I said that, and a new threat is identified tomorrow, and it applies to your threat model, I have to add to it.
No, but let me go back to, I mean, yeah, we're not saying complete because that gets into the 100% field, which none of us know. No, but Rick asks an important question, I think, in the word of robustness. Like, have I done enough to build it out? Like, am I at 100% of my own capability, or maybe not 100%, or am I at the level of my own capability that I feel that I've done what I can to the point where if I did more, then I'd have sort of diminishing returns. Let me throw, Archie, how would you answer that?
See, here's the thing, right? You provide all the architectural details as much as you can to the best of your knowledge. That is the robustness. Look, at the end of the day, what you put in will affect your deliverable, your output, right? So garbage in, garbage out, that's kind of, it's a simple thing. But if you can provide the level of details that you know to the best of your ability, to
Mhm.
me, that's a very good starting point.
Mhm. All right. So what's your answer to the robustness question, Adam?
So I build it in asking, did we do a good job?
Mhm.
Can we take that deliverable and show it to people and they say, my code isn't in this thing. Who the heck built this? This diagram doesn't make any sense to me.
Mhm.
Then it's bad. And if people look at it and they nod, then we get to, okay, yep, we've done a good job. But let me go back to the question of, is it complete?
Mhm.
There's a British statistician named George Box who says all models are wrong and some models are useful.
Mhm.
If we're going to not go and do any threat modeling because it might not be complete, we're letting the best be the enemy of the good. Go
Mhm.
do your threat modeling. You're going to get value out of it if you ask those 4 questions. And completeness is an advanced function, right?
Mhm.
Let's get started rather than worrying about, are we going to finish?
Hey, to add to what Adam
Mhm.
said, this is a common theme in cybersecurity. Are we secure? Like we
Right.
want an answer in absolute term, and unfortunately, cybersecurity is not that. It's a continuous function.
Right. So, all right, I want to get some questions from the audience. We've got a ton of really good ones. And then also I have a few that I really want to get to that I had pre-written as well. Um, this one comes from John Mumford. He asks, have you seen threat modeling techniques elevated to your enterprise risk committee, when developing your risk register, Archie? I have to assume you've seen customers deal with this, and I would assume that's something they would want to do, be aligning their threat models with their risk register. Yes.
So yes and no. Like one thing that I've seen is that threat modeling is still going through that level of maturity in an organization.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen a lot of people doing threat modeling purely from a regulatory compliance point of view. I've spoken to a lot of people when I ask them, like, hey, why are you doing threat modeling? Oh, our management has asked me to build a threat modeling process. Okay, but what is it that you want out of it? Oh, we want to be proactive. But like they really don't know why they're doing threat modeling, and that kind of, I think, is where we're going through as an industry. Some of our customers are really at that level of maturity where they are using threat modeling as an input into their risk program. So it's a level of maturity, I would say. Ultimately,
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of where you want to feed it, because your strength, your controls that you've implemented and the strengths of those controls will tell you to what extent your risk, actually residual risk, is.
All right, go ahead. Yes,
Another
Adam.
way I see people do this is that threat modeling is a control, that it's a meta control that we
Mm-hmm.
think about at the same level as a risk register. Every project has to threat model so that we know that our risk register is accurate.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right, I want to answer. This is one question that I have, and I'm going to get back to everyone else's question, but this came up in a pre-discussion the 3 of us had, and I'm going to throw this to you first, Adam. Can a threat model be bad for one company but perfect for another? And specifically, I'm talking about companies that are almost identical in the same industry, like one from Toyota to, Chevrolet. Like could one work for one and not work for the other if they're dealing with this? I would assume these are similar companies that have similar threats.
Absolutely.
And explain and give me an example if you can.
So Toyota is famous for the pull the rope, the Kaizen, the lean process. And Chevrolet is not, and so I'm going to stereotype each of them a little bit, right? Toyota's practices inform agile, Chevy's inform waterfall. So Chevy might want a really big, thick document that documents all the threats to the car. And if you drop that on someone at Toyota and it falls on their desk, they're going to be like, push that aside. And vice versa, the agile process that Toyota uses isn't going to interface well with the way stuff gets done at Chevy.
Mm-hmm.
So good for one, bad for the other. You got to focus on what's good for your organization, what's good here.
So it had to do with the architecture of processes, which definitely can be different at two different companies in the same industry. Archie, anything to add to that? And do you agree?
So I slightly disagree
Go ahead.
because my thing is from purely from a technical perspective, a bad threat model for Toyota is going to be a bad threat model for Chevy too. But from a process point of view, can they fit that threat modeling process in there would differ. Yes, in Agile, you're talking about what can I do in 2 hours, and then can I really address those? Whereas in Chevy, you're looking from a waterfall. So they want like a 50-page or 100-page or 1,000-page report, and they want to look at all of that. So it's a process thing, which makes them different. But if you look at from a threat modeling of that car, that threat model would apply to the same. So if it's bad for Toyota, it's bad for Chevy. But from a process point of view, yes, it's not applicable in one place or the other.
All right. I got a good question from Rich Mason, who asked, and I like this: where does probability of threats come from? And this is kind of the thing that I'm always sort of wondering when people come up with the risk, the risk analysis. What is the interface between threat modeling and actuarial risk management? Adam, do you know?
So I believe that we spend too much time on risk. I would like you all to
I hear tons of CISOs screaming, "What?"
I'm totally with Adam on this.
Right? I don't need a probability assessment.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need, and what we do when we talk about risk is what we're often doing is we're trying to drive organizational change.
Mm-hmm.
And what we really need is prioritization. And prioritization is a function of both what is the threat and what is the fix. And so when I say fix your S3 buckets, I say that because it's easy. And if we're threat modeling as we develop, then what happens is it's often easy to fix the threat. And so there's a chunk of things for which we just fix it. There's a chunk where we know it's too expensive to fix and it ain't going to happen. And then risk comes in, to be a little bit more respectful of the question here, risk comes in as part of that prioritization discussion in the middle, where we feed out of threat modeling into an analysis process where we decide whether or not we're going to have a fix for this particular problem, right? And this gets into the transfer, mitigate, accept, and eliminate sort of framing of risk.
Right. So Archie, you were giving a thumbs up at the very beginning there. You're saying that, the focus on probability around risk or just focusing too much risk is not necessary. Why?
Let me take the same example you gave earlier. Let's say Toyota, right? Now, Toyota may have to build 1,000 threat models, and that means that you could have like 1 million. Just say hypothetically speaking, 1 million threats. Now, traditionally, what I see people going through those 1 million threats and breaking them into risk, it's a wasteful exercise, if you ask me. For a company like Toyota, they have to look at their entire attack surface, which is 1 million threat. And then you start to say, what are the top 10 controls I can implement to reduce my attack surface from 1 million threat to, let's say, 300,000 threats? And you focus on that. And then that's your residual risk. I'm not saying risk is bad. Like, you have to kind of look at the risk register. But if you focus on these are the top 10 controls I can implement as an organization, which will bring my attack surface down by 70%. Now I've got 300,000 threats left. That's my residual risk. Of course, I need to look at certain threats which are, problematic in a sense that the impact could be really, really high. I look at that, but at the end of the day, I need to look at my attack surface in totality and focus on that. If I start looking at every threat individually and into risk, wasting my time.
Oh, That is a good point. Hey, I forgot to mention that Threat Modeler, Archie's company, Threat Modeler Software, is the ones responsible for sponsoring today's video chat. So thank you very much, Archie, and thank you, Threat Modeler Software, as well. A couple of quick things. We are 20 minutes past the hour. I'm going to ask Andrew, our producer, to drop the best bad ideas, or excuse me, the bad ideas. We'll figure out the best ones later. But drop the bad idea poll up, and then I want everyone to start voting. For that. And also Adam has posted a link to his book about threat modeling, which is entitled Threat Modeling, Designing for Security. And again, Adam literally wrote the book on this subject, so he knows what the hell he's talking about. So thank you very much, Adam, for being here. Yes, Archie.
I think our company also posted a link to threat modeling for dummies.
Yeah, so there's two books. So you got two authors of books. Sorry, did you author that book yourself? Or did you have your team, or who wrote it?
We had a ghostwriter do it.
A ghostwriter. Okay. That happens as well.
Mine is not ghostwritten.
It's written by Adam. So if you got problems with it, you know who to bug about it. So let me remind everybody, you can click on the link at the bottom to register for next week's video chat, all on hacking risk management, which is very relevant to today's discussion, isn't it? Right now. The poll is up. So please start voting for your favorite bad ideas. All right. Let me see. Who do we got here? This is kind of maybe a little more sort of a business philosophical question. I'm going to throw this one to you, Archie, first. And Stuart asks, many in security have put off threat modeling, even though they understand its benefits. Why do you believe this is happening? And this may be part of your sales cycle. You have to deal with this very problem. Archie?
Oh, we do. I mean, this is a very common thing. There are multiple reasons. It's not an initiative in the enterprise. It's not a company-wide initiative yet. It's also something where people are not really effectively communicating to the development teams why they should be doing threat modeling. Mm-hmm. If you think about it, and I've spoken to a lot of development teams, they always think that, I have to do another security exercise now. But if you can tell them, look, you've been doing this static analysis, dynamic analysis, it gives you a bunch of vulnerabilities and you have to go fix it. If you look at it in the past 10 years, developers have gotten better at writing secure code. I'm not saying they're perfect yet, but they've gotten better. Where they were 10 years ago, where they are today. But one thing that is missing is the overall view of the enterprise. If you have a microservices architecture that's managed by somebody else, you don't know what vulnerabilities are there, right? So you're only good at writing your own code securely. But if you build a threat model, you're looking at a complete picture, and then you know where you need to put what controls and all of that stuff. So if you can really communicate to the developers that threat modeling actually will help you more than as a burden, I don't think we've done a good job of kind of communicating that effectively either to the senior leadership or to the development teams.
You deal with this very issue of people just not doing it for one reason or the other, Adam.
Yeah, and the threat modeling has a bit of a rap as a waterfall-y heavy process where it's got to be this big complex thing. I know companies that start out with just asking 4 questions, right? Again, what are we working on? What can go wrong? What are we going to do about it? Do we do a good job? And then they get more and more in-depth over time. And one of the challenges, and I say this, I created the Microsoft threat modeling tool. I help another company, Continuum, do this. And the thing that happens is people say, I need a tool while I'm getting started. They don't start out by understanding what they're doing. And so sometimes, not always, but sometimes they can trip over those tools. Mm-hmm. And we say, oh, this is big and complicated. No, this is simple. You can do this today. You're doing it in the chat. We need people to just get going, and they'll learn what they're doing, and they'll learn how to make it work for them. Someone
how about this? What is literally a threat model, like a way we could approach it right now, in like the most simplistic way? Like immediately when this chat is over, and the meetup as well, everyone could just do this. What would be the like?
Let's do it live. We've got a poll running. What can
Yes.
go right? So we've got a web server. We've got a bunch of people with web clients, right? That's what we're working on. We're working on picking the worst idea in threat modeling. And let's say Archie, I'm going to personalize this a little bit, if that's okay.
Okay.
Archie wants to make sure his question comes out on top. How can Archie do that? What can go wrong? So instead of respecting the whole of the chat, we get Archie's idea. Go. Right? We're threat modeling.
Oh, you're asking me?
Yeah. Do it live.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, if that's the case, I can start bombarding my link and in an infinite loop. It's just going to be my link right over there.
Okay, what do we do about that?
And that's kind of sort of like a denial of service, if you will, in a way. So you start to put controls in place. But I want to actually make it even more simpler, Adam.
Okay.
I mean, I always like to talk when we talking about threat modeling. I actually personalize it in a way. Hey, you have to go to office. You have a commute to office. Let's threat model that. That's something everybody knows, right? Because it's not something now you have to kind of understand technology and whatnot. Or hey, you're buying a house. It's the simplest thing. Everybody threat models buying a house. You're going to look at the neighborhood. You're going to look at the crime statistics. You're going to look at the school system. Like they are threat modeling all of that. So it's not something people don't threat model in their day-to-day life. They do. But when it comes to technology, there's a barrier. And in my mind, it's the way you're representing that threat model, which kind of becomes difficult. So like, I'll tell you, one of our customer who use threat modeler has kind of communicated this to us that in their organization, every developer threat models today. Why? Because according to them, it's the same language. They are used to whiteboarding the architecture diagram in the way they see this. And so it's easier for them to understand. Whatever people understand, what they see, they understand, it's easier for them to grasp and learn from it. So like Adam is a big proponent of whiteboarding. I think it's just one of the same thing. Like if I can whiteboard something and show you how the information is flowing, people will get that. Developers know it. So it's just making it simple and easy and talking in a language they understand.
And language, shared understanding, right? When we whiteboard, everyone can point at, everyone can see what's in my head. And we're generating that communication. We're generating the shared.
You put all of that on a whiteboard, Adam? What's in your head?
Yeah, no. What's in my head does not fit on a whiteboard. But yes, I put the whole architecture onto a whiteboard, and I get another whiteboard.
There you go. All right, we got just 2 minutes. Yeah, exactly 2 minutes before I want to go to the Department of Yes. So let's see if we can answer this question quickly for both of you. I'll start with you, Adam. Or actually, no, I'm going to start with you, Archie. Given this comes from Robin Schachter, and he asks, given the move to modern application architecture like microservices and APIs, are there new or specific threat vectors you are focusing on when creating a threat model? Archie.
See, this is the, I think, it's a very interesting question, and that's a common misconception, that if I'm using a different technology, then the threat vectors are different. If you look at it, your denial of service is a denial of service. How I do it could differ, right?
Well, but this, I think this gets into the completeness question that we were asking earlier, doesn't it?
And that's what I'm saying. So
yes.
A denial of service attack is a denial of service attack. How I'm doing it could be different now because it's a microservice architecture. That means that microservice is not talking to the front end. It's going through some other system, right? So the denial of service could happen in a different way here. Or authentication bypass. Okay, now I could say an insider threat is much more applicable than from an external and all that. But the threat vectors, if you think about it, are the same. The technology is different. The controls could be different here, right? But we cannot, like, very rarely, yes, if you're talking about a phone, a cell phone, all of a sudden, yes, I have to look at a different attack vector there because now you're talking about a 5G tower, a 4G tower, and this and that. But in a web application world, whether you're using microservices, whether you're using a web application, it's the attack vectors are the same, but you have to look at the controls that you implement from a technological point of view could be different. And also where you put the control could be different. Because if you have a WAF in front of a web application that's talking to a microservice, your downstream impact could be different, or your upstream impact could be different. So all those all those scenarios do come in when you look at a threat model. But from a threat vector perspective, very rare are you going to come across a different attack vector.
Hold on.
Hello, welcome to the Department of Yes, where no request is ever rejected.
You know what that means? I know I cut you off there, Adam. I know you want to jump in, but we do have to go to our best bad ideas and play the Department of Yes. All right. So I'm going to throw the first one to you, and this is comes right out of the world of Dungeons and Dragons. Use a 4-sided die labeled accept, mitigate, avoid, transfer. Roll the die for every choice, and then execute. Why are we going to do this, Adam?
We're going to do this because everyone gets focused on controls. Everyone jumps to mitigate. And what this does is it forces us to be disciplined about using different ways of addressing risk or something.
Or something. You almost had there. I'm going to give you I'm giving you both for that. All right. Why are we going to the 4-sided die for decision making, like the Magic 8-ball? Why are we going to do it this way, Archie?
You mean that those 4 things? Could you repeat those?
Yes. The 4 are. Let me read them again. So you use a 4-sided die labeled accept, mitigate. So you're accepting this threat, you're mitigating it, you're avoiding it, you're transferring it. That's an 8-sided die.
I did have the 4 handy.
Yes.
So I would definitely use it, and I would actually make sure that I tweak the die in a way that it rolls over accept all the time.
Oh, right.
Or transfer.
So you're going to roll a loaded 4-sided die.
I would like the transfer all the time. And I would, so that I can go and convince my management, hey, all you need to do is buy cyber insurance.
Yes! You know what? I like this. You fooled them into believing, and you're just rolling a loaded die. I love that. All right. Second question here. This comes the second suggestion. Create threat models on an Etch-a-Sketch, which is not too far from your whiteboard, and just take a little bit longer. Adam, why do you want to do this?
Really, the reason that an Etch-a-Sketch can be an essential tool for threat modeling is it forces people to collaborate and huddle, really get together.
Maybe not too COVID friendly.
Wearing a mask.
Yes.
And execute on your threat modeling.
All right. Yes, sir! I like the getting cozy together. Why are we going to do all our threat modeling on an Etch-a-Sketch, Archie?
So that I can draw a picture of an attacker and say, hey, see, this is the bad guy here. He can come and take all your crown jewels and run away.
Oh, Archie.
Shake up your threat modeling approach.
Oh, no! I don't know about that one,
I can
Archie.
focus on attacker-centric threat modeling rather than...
I'm giving you one way. All right, here you go. This one sounds like it's actually been done before. I'm going to throw this to you first, Archie. All right. Organize a full day threat modeling session with 10 people and come up with a PDF output that lands in a drawer. Why do you want to do this?
So that I can show them that I'm doing my job, and I did a very fruitful exercise of wasting 10 people's time, so that PDF can never be used again. But
no facetious. Why are we doing it? We're creating it. We're putting it in a drawer, never to be seen again.
Because I can prove that, hey, we did the exercise. I can check the box that we did a threat model for this.
So if compliance comes knocking, you've got it. Excellent.
Yes.
Oh yeah. I like it. Adam, why are you doing this?
Yeah, I was going with regulation and lawyers myself.
All right. I'll give it to you. Bravo! All right, excellent, both of you. We may come back to more bad ideas. So please, if you have not voted, which a lot of you have not, because we got well over. I think what are we at now, Andrew? We're over 110 people live just a moment ago. Let's get back to the questions. We've got lots more questions coming in. By the way, excellent bad ideas, everybody. Thank you. They were horrible. I don't think we want to do any of those. All right. I like this question from Jacob Kaluzny, and he asks, threat model output. Adam, is it a PDF with diagrams or is it Jira tickets with subtasks? What are we doing?
Wait, is this a bad idea question?
No, this is an actual question. It's not a bad idea. Do you think both of them are bad ideas?
No. I was having trouble figuring out where the bad idea was.
No, it's not a bad idea. An actual question.
So I love Jira tickets as output for the things that are immediately actionable. I love it when a Jira has a tag in it that says found by threat modeling or this is a security bug so that you can run queries. I also love having some record. We did this. We came up with these longer term problems that we need to think about, and we're going to stick those. Please, not a PDF. Can we go with a wiki? Can we go with something in Markdown that's easy to process and integrate into other things? But both are good.
All right, the wiki option. So is the wiki option your favorite? And by the way, have you ever done a wiki?
There is probably no approach to threat modeling that I haven't tried and worked with a customer at some point.
So let me ask you, what's your personal favorite then? What's your all-time fave? Just
so my all-time favorite, you've said it. My all-time favorite is I have here, because my office isn't set up, I have whiteboard books. I don't know if you can see this.
Oh, is this like those rocket books?
No, this is my friends at Agile Stationery made dry erase notebooks for us.
What is Rocket Book? I have one of these in here.
I have a Rocket Book, but it doesn't. So these are literal whiteboard pens. These are whiteboard pens, and I can scribble in it. I can erase with my thumb the way you're supposed to. I must mention the Rocket Book does the same thing, and by the way, you can it will output to you can like upload photos to specific drives. It goes to directed places. Let me ask you, Archie, same question. Let's just jump to your favorite way of sort of what do you do next after the threat model, and is that part of threat modeler software?
Oh, absolutely. And Jira tickets is definitely the way to go. It is a part of threat modeler software. The reason I want to go down that path is because there will be an audit trail. So we have tickets. We know what somebody took action on, what were not taken action on, which backlog did it go to. There's an audit trail, who did what, so that we track it. At the end of the day, we understand in a large organization, right? It's not easy to fix everything. But as long as we are keeping track of what's been done, what's not been done, and when is that going to be done, I think that's progress.
Mm-hmm. Well, then let me ask the kind of the obvious follow-up question, because you're talking about this is progress. How do you show that the threat modeling you're doing is making positive change for the organization? That people are going, oh, we're doing the threat modeling thing. This is a giant time suck. It's created a lot more Jira tickets for me, yada, yada, yada. Like how we all the worker bees understanding like, oh, this is going to a greater cause. Archie?
So this is, I think this is a very good point you brought up, David. And this is something which I think most of the people don't really communicate effectively to their development team. So if you build a threat model, let's say there is no threat model. So the standard process is, hey, if you're writing something, here's the list of 200 security requirements. You have to make sure you find the right one and implement. But when you build a threat model, right, you understand the threats. Now I'm giving you only those 3 or 4 that you need to implement. So I'm saving you a bunch of time that otherwise you would have wasted trying to figure out, and maybe you would have taken the wrong one for all we know. But an effective threat model will tell you these are the 3 security requirements that you need to implement, and this is how you implement it. oh, by the way, there's this input validation library, centralized input validation library that we use. Go use that as opposed to writing your own. That has been security vetted and all that. So it saves developers time overall, and it's something they will appreciate because now they are doing a good job from a security perspective and actually wasting less time thinking it's another security thing.
Right. So they're chasing something that's specifically going after an issue that's attached to a risk, may I assume? And does this at this point, I mean, are there ways that are done that there's reviews like, okay, we've done all this. Now let's go look at what our our risk profile is. Are we managing our risk better now that we've attacked these different threat models? Yes. I mean, I'm sort of envisioning it plays itself out like that. Does it play itself out like that?
In some cases, yes. It comes down to, again, the effectiveness of your threat modeling process. Most of the companies that we are seeing even today are not mature. So they are like, hey, we did threat modeling, we checked the box, great. They don't follow up. They don't close the loop, if I will, right? They don't validate that this was the output of a threat model. Now that the application is developed, let's test it and see whether these threats were mitigated properly and all of that. So I think that level of maturity is still missing, but ultimately that's where I think the industry is heading.
Let me ask you, Adam, what have you seen that level of maturity play itself out? The way I described it, where it's like threat model, fix, let's go look at our risk. Is it being managed? Hey, there's an actual connection with all of this.
There are, but let me go back to the question about is it effective and how do we know?
Sure. And step us through. Yeah.
And this is why I think of did we do a good job as the first question or as the fourth question we ask. Mm-hmm. When I'm helping a company get started and develop that maturity, I tell them to spend as much time on retrospectives as they spend threat modeling. The question I like to ask...
Very few people do that. I can't imagine anyone does that.
You don't have to do it for very long. People want to be heard. People want a chance to respond to what you're asking them to do. Mm-hmm. And so spending that time, and I push, because you're right, people are skeptical about this. The other question I love is, would you recommend threat modeling to a friend or colleague? Right?
And how does that play itself out?
That plays itself out if they're not saying yes. If you're not getting an enthusiastic yes, you haven't pushed it well. And Rich Moon asked, should you put threat modeling in your SDL before you've threat modeled individual things? And my answer is do it slowly. Right? Don't drive to threat modeling just to get it in as a requirement. Get it to the point where you've got some champs. This is culture change. This is different from rolling out static analysis. Mm-hmm. And if you're gonna actually change the way a culture works, you've got to do it slowly. You've got to get buy-in from people so that they say, of course we threat model here. How can we ship code in 2020 without knowing what can go wrong from a security perspective?
So this goes to a nice question that I have here from Mitchell Damaza, and I'm actually going to throw this to you, Archie, because I'm assuming this is part of your sales process or you have to deal with this very issue. At what point do business leaders realize the value of threat modeling? Like, is there a certain thing you say or a certain thing they see, or maybe there's certain threats that or an actual breaches and attacks that happen in the horizon that makes them realize, oh, we have to start doing this? Like, what gets them over the hump?
So what we're seeing are multiple driving factors. One is that there are certain leaders who are very mature at the top, who've done this in the past, who knows the value of it. So when they talk to people,
when you say leaders, do you mean like competitors in the business that are doing threat modeling and they're not, and they're like, oh, geez, we need to be doing this?
No, I'm talking about, so like, for example, like certain CISOs, right? They actually are like, hey, we've done it in the past. We know this is a very important tool and we should be doing this. And they communicate that effectively to their teams. Like, hey, this is what I want to do. I know you guys have to start somewhere, but ultimately in 3 years' time, this is where I want to be. Then there's a second segment, which is driven by regulatory and compliance. So their value proposition is like, hey guys, I have to submit this medical device to FDA and I need a threat model there. That's the second thing. And then there are the third ones who are like, hey guys, go and figure it out because we got audited, and whether it's a BSIM audit or whether it's a other cybersecurity audit of their process, and threat modeling was identified as a gap. There they just say, hey, guys, go ahead and do threat modeling, but there's no communication to the people below, like what exactly they want out of it. So this is the different level of maturity in different organizations, coming from the senior leadership to the people below. And it's something very easy for us to find out when we talk to them and we ask questions like, hey, why are you doing threat modeling? You'll know what their response is and why they're doing it.
Adam, same question to you. What have you found has been the impetus that gets people, or maybe it's like when people hire you, call you, say, hey, we need your help. Like, what do you find is the impetus that they start doing this?
Every company has a slightly different frame. Right. And for example, I'm doing a lot with medical devices, and the FDA is talking about threat modeling as a way to be structured, systematic, and comprehensive in your security pre-market. That gets translated to, and I don't want to name names, but here at Big Medical Device Maker, we do these things for patient safety. And in 2020, the FDA is telling us we need to do more pre-market security. So that's one answer. Another answer, go back to the automotive. The automotive industry is coming out with new standards, especially around autonomous vehicles, but also just connected, increasingly computerized vehicles. And so for them, it often falls in safety, as in how do we predict what's going to go wrong with our vehicles? And so it's always a matter of going and talking to executives, right? And this might be driven by a consultative sales process. It might be driven by a leader who's come in from somewhere else. Sometimes it's driven by someone who sees something and says, wow, I'm hearing more and more about this threat modeling stuff. I ought to go do it. And you build up the case. And here I actually want to pitch someone else's book. Can I pitch someone else's book instead of mine?
Of course, sure.
John Cotter's book on leading change. It's from Harvard Business Press. It's really short. I hate business press books. This one is good.
Okay.
Getting a sense of urgency, defining early wins, overcoming objections, sustaining change. This is change management 101, and you've got to do it. And in 2020, there actually is one reason that everyone is threat modeling, which is the pandemic changed everything. We need tools to collaborate when we don't have a whiteboard in front of us or a Rocketbook. And our customers care more about security. They are newly aware of security because everyone's working remotely. We're thinking about what to do. And so I'm seeing a lot of threat modeling projects actually driven by the pandemic as we're looking for a common language for development, operations, security to talk to each other.
It's also a common threat. I mean, that's often people get around common threats, and that's the doozy of all common threats for that matter. All right, let me just warn everybody, we are 12 minutes to wrapping this whole sucker up. So I got a ton more questions. I got more bad ideas. Just a few things to remind you, please click that link at the bottom to register for next Friday's video chat. Also, just a basic announcement. The two podcasts, the CISO Security Vendor Relationship Podcast and Defense in Depth, will actually be dark next week because of the U.S. election. I think that's going to kind of consume everybody. But we will have our daily show because there's going to be a lot of cybersecurity news around the election as well. Just want to make sure everyone knows that. I want to also thank our sponsor again, Threat Modeler Software. They are available at threatmodeler.com. I should mention that. And by the way, if Dennis hadn't posted it already, please post the book, that Dummies book as well, in the chat as well. So everyone has a link to that as well. All right, let's jump to, and by the way, please vote. I'm going to try to squeeze in one more. And by the way, stick around for our meetup at the very end. That link is going to change at the very end, the last 5 minutes. I want you all to stick around for the meetup because it's a ton of fun. If you've never participated, it's a good time. Bunch of meetings. All right, let's go to another question. Well, there was one here from Rich Lindbergh. This was the one. I'm going to throw this to you, Adam, first. Adam, you raised the notion of shared vocabulary, common understanding. So I'm sure it's different in all situations here, but I'm going to go back to Rich's question. Is there a success strategy for onboard different business groups who may reject risk as they cannot relate or do not care? And he says, other than the Etch-a-Sketch, of course, because everyone can relate to that. Like, there might be a risk that you're like, I don't see how this applies to us kind of attitude. How do you deal with that?
So I like to start with the 4 questions.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you can't tell me what you're working on, if you're unable to discuss what can go wrong, if you're not able to talk about what are we going to do about it, I can have a conversation with the CEO about that denialism,
mm-hmm.
right? And we can get more and more in depth about how to do this, but you have to answer those 4 questions today.
4 questions being?
What are we working on?
Yes.
What can go wrong? What are we going to do about it? Did we do a good job?
Right. Just want to repeat. I mean, you mentioned it at the beginning. I just want to repeat again. I'm going to ask you the same question. Like, how do you communicate the different? You all have it on a card? I can't read it. It's not focused. Put it by your face. It'll focus some more.
Yeah, it's not. All right. But it fits on a wallet card. It's easy.
If you ever forget about it. Archie, let me ask you the same question as well. How do you deal with different business units that just may seem, disassociated with the concept of threat modeling or with a very specific threat?
I've faced that in the past. In my past jobs, not a threat modeler, but in the past jobs, I've seen that where people would be like, "Hey, this does not apply to us," and there's a certain level of discussion you can have with them to see. But if they're dismissive, then I always carry a form with me. Hey, here's the risk acceptance form. Can you sign? If this doesn't apply to you, that's okay. All you have to do is sign over here and say this doesn't apply to me. So that, and I'll tell you.
That changes the conversation in a big way.
Oh, it completely changes the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, and I've heard that a lot with regards to getting people to sign off on the risk in general. That's a big deal. And CISOs are always like, hey, we told you about this. You said we don't want to do this. Okay, could you just sign this saying, I told you this and you don't want to do the mitigation that I recommended, kind of a thing. Yes, heard that plenty of times. All right, what we got? We have 8 minutes left. All right, let me go to another question from our phenomenal audience as well. This comes from, hold on, let me click. Comes from, hold on, it's not saying who it is. Lope, I believe. This is for you, Archie. What kind of tools is Threat Modeler implementing, and what are you lacking? Tell us what you're good at. Tell us what you're bad at.
See, we're good at threat modeling, and I, frankly speaking, the thing that I always say is that it's really difficult to kind of put science behind the art of threat modeling. Mm-hmm. But if you can get to 80%, 85%, that's success. Because what you're asking everyone is like, hey, you don't have to do everything, or you don't have to repeat everything that you've done again and again. If we can automate 70, 80% of it, then we can have the security people focus on more pressing problems as opposed to just kind of going there and building the architecture diagram and identifying the same threats. So Threat Modeler is the best at it, and I will say that, and I'm willing to put my money on it as well. And what was the second part of this question?
Well, I just said what are you good at? What are you bad at? Essentially, what Lope's question is: what kind of tools is Threat Modeler implementing, and what are you lacking?
Yeah, so ours is a threat modeling tool. It is a very collaborative tool, as in like Google Docs. So you can have, like when Adam is taking his classes, he can use Threat Modeler and everybody can have the same diagram. So I know he doesn't have the whiteboard, but inside Threat Modeler, the whiteboard you can have 15 people work on the same architecture diagram at the same time, just like Google Docs. So one of the big part that I think both me and Adam agree on is that it's also a social exercise where we want to bring people together, where we want them to work together and all that. So we check that box pretty effectively. Our intelligent threat engine, like one of the things is like zero false positive. That's another thing which is very, a powerful aspect of threat modeler. So I think even one of the bigger problem we've seen in cybersecurity working with developers is like the false positive, kind of you lose the credibility with the development team. It's like, hey, or even if you look at threat modeling, you have 5 different people who build a manual threat model of the same system. They will have 5 different threat model taken to the development teams, and they're going to ask, hey, which one should I go with? Which one is the right one? Which is the wrong one? But threat modeler brings that consistency. And of course, then the automation and scalability. You can have thousands of threat models and look at all of them together. So that's kind of where threat modeler really, really, really shines as an enterprise tool.
All right. So I want to do this. We have almost 4 minutes left. And so make sure that you, Andrew, change the link at the bottom for our video chat. I want to give both of you an opportunity to give some closing comments and really closing advice. And this is kind of one of the things I would hope you could answer in the closing advice is, what is the number one thing that everyone needs to implement for threat modeling? And what is the least important at the same time? Like everyone thinks they need to do this, but if you had to cut one thing, cut this kind of thing. I'll let you go first, Adam.
So okay, so I want to comment on the training thing. When I train tool independently because I feel that the skills are the key thing that people
give it to me in 90 seconds.
90 seconds. Okay, so I'll give it to you in fewer. The key thing to do is to go ask the 4 questions. It's to go and say, how can you not be doing this? Start on the path. You'll develop that maturity over time.
Okay. And then going to my question, sort of a closing wrap. I mean, you said the start of the 4 questions. I would assume that's your number one. What is kind of least important that people don't pay attention to, or shouldn't need to pay attention to as much, and they think they do?
People get really wrapped up in thinking that that someone else has the answer for them. That someone else is going to tell them, do it exactly like this. And that exactly like this is going to work for them. And, I love tools. I love consistency, but you've got to start with, let's do the work. And you've got to do it collaboratively. You've got to involve the whole team.
That's a good point. We keep bringing back to that. All right, Archie, we have just 2 minutes left. By the way, let me tell everyone, go ahead and click on that link right now. You'll still, again, stay in our video chat. It'll just open up the icebreaker for our meetup. And immediately when it's done, we're going to start the icebreaker. Archie, your final advice, what they need to do with first, and what maybe not be so important that you have to deal with.
See, so there are 2 aspects. Whenever I talk about threat modeling, I always talk about threat modeling has 2 purposes. One is, of course, capture your system, understand what the threats and the controls and all of that. So that is important, but it is equally important to look at it as a program. Don't get hung up onto 1 threat model or 2 threat models. Think about what the program is going to look like as an enterprise. And so
it's a journey.
Exactly. And which is kind of feeding into the least important. Like don't get hung up on 1 threat model. Think of what is the program looks like. And it's an incremental exercise. So don't think about completeness. Completeness will come over time, but start somewhere, put in 20%, then 40%, make it iterative, mature as an organization. Start with 20%, then come back 40%, then 60%. But if you're going to look to flip the switch, it's going to be very hard for you to think of this as a process across the organization.
An excellent point to close on. All right, we just have a few seconds left. Everyone click that link at the bottom. Join us. I see already a ton of people are coming in. Go ahead and do that. Make sure you have your camera and your microphone ready for that. Adam Showstack, thank you very much for joining us. He is the author of Threat Modeling, Designing for Security, and Archie Agarwal, the CEO of Threat Modeler Software. Thank you so much for sponsoring this episode. We have just 8 seconds. Everybody click the link. See us over at the Icebreaker. We're all going to be there. Bye, everybody. Take us out.